Hello and welcome. I'm Sulaiman Aleda. Tonight, Nigerians march in Abuja in solidarity with the nation's military, urge troops to maintain momentum against Boko Haram. Thousands troop out in Cameroon's capital Yaoundé in protest against Boko Haram attacks. Fuel queues surface in the nation's capital, Abuja. Residents call for quick government intervention. And doctors in Rivers State protest frequent kidnapping of their colleagues by unknown gunmen.
On business news tonight, overnight lending rates at the interbank market ease at the end of the week on liquidity inflow.
And on sports news, good weekend for Nigerian football as Kano Pillars, Warri Wolves and Dolphins all qualify for the next round in the African club competitions.
We begin tonight in Abuja, where dozens of Nigerians today marched around the nation's capital to show solidarity with the Nigerian troops fighting the Boko Haram insurgents in the northeast. The organizers of the rally say they are motivated especially by recent reports of reclaimed territories by the military and the counter-terrorism offensive launched against the terrorists. They also say they express confidence that the show of solidarity will boost the morale of the forces in the ongoing fight to root out terrorism in Nigeria.
While the real fighters are slugging it out in the war front, this group that calls itself Support Our Troops Foundation take to the streets of Abuja in a show of solidarity with the troops. Participants believe that this show of support and acceptance will go a long way to boost the morale of the troops fighting the insurgents.
Our armed forces and security services are presently in the theater of combat in the northeast, working very hard to make Nigeria safe. And we owe it to them as a duty as Nigerians to support them, to rally around them, to boost their morale, to let them know that we know that they're out there.
In the last 1 week or so, more than 11 communities have been regained. The territories that were hitherto within the purview of the insurgents have been regained. They are now part and parcel of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The flags of terrorists have been lowered. And as done in other climes, this is expected of citizens to support the troops in practical terms.
I think it's very important that our troops understand that their mission has legitimacy, it has acceptance, it has support. And that is what I think this is about. We march to also send a message to the enemies of our country that on the matters of our national security, on the matters of our national unity, on the matters of national integration and national stability, we stand united.
But this support is not just for the Nigerian troops. It is also a show of solidarity with the multinational troops battling the insurgents.
We're seeing renewed vigor. We're seeing a lot of support from the international community. You know, the new coalition where we have the Chadian and Cameroonian army, blocking on the other sides to make sure that the terrorists have nowhere to run to. And we want to stand behind the military, as they say, never again.
The destination of this march is the Army headquarters, where the Army spokesperson, Brigadier General Chris Olukolade, received them. According to him, this solidarity work will spur them to achieve more results and never again will reclaimed territories fall to the insurgents.
Our Commander-in-Chief, being the first democratically elected President of the Republic, was right in the front, encouraging the troops. This is the first of such experience, and it meant a lot to us in terms of morale. Today, you have backed this up by physically marching to the defense headquarters. We want to assure you that this gesture will not go in vain. It will spur us into more efforts.
The troops have recorded remarkable successes in the last 1 week, reclaiming over 10 communities from the insurgents. This march and other gestures from the government and citizenry is expected to boost the morale of the troops in their efforts to crush Boko Haram.
Well, while some Nigerians trooped out in Abuja in solidarity with the Nigeria's troops fighting in the northeast, thousands of people have marched in Cameroon's capital Yaoundé to protest against Boko Haram insurgents who have been making incursions into their country in recent times. The march is also in solidarity with their soldiers fighting alongside Nigerian, and Chadian troops to defeat the militant group. It was also meant to inform the country's public about the threat posed by Boko Haram and the atrocities being committed by the sect members. About 170 schools in Cameroon's northern region are said to have been closed due to the insurgency, which began in Nigeria in 2009 and recently spread to neighboring countries, where the group has been burning villages and kidnapping residents.
It has been very impressive. A lot of emotions in the whole thing. I saw ministers and saw the whole of Cameroon come together, people from all nooks and crannies. Shout on one voice, calling Kolofata, calling Waza, calling all those other areas in the northern parts of Cameroon to know we are behind them, most especially our troops.
Well, the excitement and zest we saw in those are the two groups, one in Nigeria and Cameroon, one group of Nigerians who appear most delighted over the successes being recorded by the military in the northeast as a Bring Back Our Girls campaigners. They're hopeful that the renewed efforts will lead to the rescue of the over 200 schoolgirls kidnapped last year in Chibok, Borno State. At a sit-out session in Abuja today, the campaigners, however, expressed concern on the level of intelligence available to the military on the whereabouts of the girls.
The nation has witnessed several bombings and attacks from members of the Islamic sect Boko Haram, especially in the northeast. However, the tide of the attacks appeared to be abating following the increased activities of the Nigerian military. Several towns and communities have been reclaimed by the military, and recently a group of people kidnapped by the sect regained their freedom. While the momentum against the insurgents is building, there are still questions on the whereabouts of over 200 schoolgirls kidnapped by the sect in Chibok community in Borno State.
If for over 300 days, 320 days now, girls are missing, and a lot of us seem to move on as if nothing has happened, then I don't know how civilized or how human we are as human beings in this country, because I keep saying the fate of our Chibok girls will indeed prove whether we are actually human beings, whether we are civilized or not, because such grave incidents cannot just happen, and a lot of us are moving on as if nothing has happened.
These are members of the Bring Back Our Girls group, and they have been holding this sit-out session for several months, demanding action for the release of the schoolgirls. They are hoping that the renewed military efforts will ensure the safe recovery of the girls.
The military doesn't seem to have enough intelligence capacity, and so even though a few weeks after the girls were taken, the Chief of Defense Staff said he knew where the girls were. Chief of Defense Staff said he knew where the girls were. Up to today, the girls have not been found. So obviously, they don't have enough intelligence, and they should work on the area of intelligence.
The government are paying attention to our cries, our voices. Why I'm saying this is because we know, as we're speaking now, we know that the military effort is being intensified, which is actually yielding some positive results. Notwithstanding, we wouldn't want to encourage the government, particularly the politicians, to take advantage of the situation. But what we're saying in essence that we should expect more and more effort so that these girls will be rescued.
These campaigners want to end this sit-out session But that will be if the ongoing fight against the insurgents leads to the release of the Chibok schoolgirls. Paul Nwachukwu, Channels Television News.
Well, the outcome of Nigeria's forthcoming elections will go a long way in influencing democracy and peace building in Africa. This is the view of some academics and international affairs professionals at the African Leadership Conference in King's College, London. The former governor of Ekiti State, Dr. Kaide Fayemi, who delivered a lecture on peace building, leadership and democratic consolidation in Africa, noted that insurgency and political participation should be given greater attention. Doris Okanwa reports from London.
Academics, analysts and politicians cut to some of the issues at the heart of Africa's democracy while gathered at the Africa Leadership Center in London. This year, at least 10 countries on the continent, including Nigeria, will conduct elections, whether presidential, parliamentary or both. But what is the level of peace building, leadership and democratic consolidation in Africa? Can there be successful elections without these factors in place? In the case of Nigeria, the nation's prominent place in Africa is drawing a lot of attention to the coming polls.
Election is a peace-building issue, even for Nigeria. People can see now that if things don't go the way they ought to go, Nigeria can just relapse into violence, Nigeria can relapse into conflict and crisis, and the beginning of that is if there is any attempt to promote a constitutional crisis.
At the roots of much of the conflict that we have on the continent of Africa has been that our process of nation building is key. It's ongoing. Sometimes it stagnates, it goes into reversal, but how we build our nations and the whole process of nation building and how effectively we do that determines the extent to which we have peace or conflict.
Leadership or democracy is not efficient without accountability. Looking at electoral manifestos across board, analysts argue that the people must look at the long-term benefits and not immediate gratification. Promises just won't do.
In many countries in Africa is we will give you something to eat now if you give us the cross against my name on the thing. So it is very much like that in Kenya. It's very much like that in Zimbabwe and many other countries in Africa. It's something to eat now.
I think one of the biggest challenges that we are facing in Africa is how can you be able to implement what you promise? I think the issue is not that we don't have the deficiency in terms of promises. Every election will have tons and tons of promises, but who are the people who are going to implement?
The economic downturn in Nigeria is one of such challenges that requires strategic implementation of effective policies to douse tensions around livelihoods.
I think you're seeing this in many countries across Africa, that incumbents, particularly now when there's an economic crisis, and there certainly is an economic crisis in Nigeria with the falling price of oil, the weakening of the currency, the rise of interest rates, people are uncertain about the future.
Elections stand as a major hallmark of democracy. But there is a concern that African countries, including Nigeria, might continue to struggle with consolidation if the structures of leadership, peace and security are constrained. Doris Okanwa, Channels Television News, London.
Well, in part two, after the break, contractors in Imo State protest non-payment for job done as state government asks for documents to justify claims. Stay with us.